Agencies Drinking Beer is brought to you by Proposify, software that helps you deliver beautiful proposals in the cloud and close more deals.
Welcome to the 53rd episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. On this week's show, we're talking to Kevin Brown from Industrial Strength Marketing, and he's going to offer some tips for agencies that are working with manufacturing and distribution companies. Well, we've got a very interesting interview coming up very soon with Kevin Brown. So many Kevins. I saw an Onion article the other day that said that that America was like leads the world in the amount of Kevins.
I saw you had sent that to me, very, very profound while I was away. I saw that on Facebook. Thank you. I was surprised, though. I mean, because it's an Irish name. I figure Ireland was full of them.
Is it an Irish name? Well, I don't know. I guess there's a lot of Irish in America, right?
There is.
Okay. Well, anyway, as I said, it's a cool interview coming up with Kevin Brown, and I always like it when we talk to agency owners, agencies that specialize. And I don't know. I find it actually interesting, the marketing and distribution business. Such an old school, like classic business model, and it's cool to see an agency that specializes in working with clients in that business.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about something else. So, wrote a blog post the other day, and it was all on partnering with software companies. So, I'm not sure, in the last couple of years, we've seen, I think, a lot of growth in this area where more and more agencies are deciding to not specialize in a vertical, but specialize in a horizontal. So instead of, digging into an industry like Kevin's business at Industrial Strength Marketing, they instead are specializing in a piece of software like HubSpot. And so I wrote a blog post called, should you become an agency partner with a software giant? And Steve also did a nice little illustration of a friendly giant.
Yeah, it looks a bit like,
looks like Alex
Plum
on our team. Yeah, just a big, burly, bearded man.
Yep.
So first of all, what do we mean? It's kind of an interesting model because a lot of SaaS companies, especially when they're selling like high-priced software it's a very involved, it's not like an easy app to learn, but there's a lot of meat to it. SaaS companies need help when it comes to training people and getting them using it. So use HubSpot, for example. They know that if somebody just were to sign up to HubSpot on a free trial, they probably wouldn't convert to a paid user without a lot of training and hand-holding. And once people start using it after 6 to 12 months, they start to see the value, so they'll be retained. So it's very smart for them to reach out to agencies and have agencies kind of adopt their whole inbound model, learn the software for themselves, and then also, teach it to their clients. So it's kind of like a nice symbiotic relationship where the SaaS company is feeding leads to the agency, and the agency is helping the SaaS company acquire and retain clients. So, it's if you don't want to specialize in a vertical industry, it is kind of a smart approach. We've talked to a few people like this on the show before. We've talked to Kula Partners, they're HubSpot, a HubSpot agency. I think we've talked to a couple HubSpot agencies as well. And we've talked to, you weren't there for, Kevin, but what's his name? Aaron Whitman. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because he had a web design development company, and they sort of switched over to become Shopify experts. So,
well, let's face it too. When we were at the Infusionsoft conference or the PartnerCon, I mean, that's another model.
Yeah,
uses the same. I mean, that's a big part of their success.
Exactly. So in this post, I kind of lay out the benefits of being a partner of a SaaS platform, and then I wouldn't call them cons, but maybe caveats or things to look out for. So one of them is that it does help you get a steady source of leads, which is great because leads, agencies often have a hard time at getting leads, quality ones. And so all of these SaaS companies offer partner directories. So people who are looking for a Shopify expert or a HubSpot partner can go to their website and put in, a geographic location or a type of specialty, and then they can find your agency that way. And I was very curious if this actually does work. Like, does it actually generate leads? But there's a nice video now. It's put on by Shopify. So mind you, they're cherry picking this example. But this guy, Kurt Elster, has a company called EtherCycle. And it was just a general web design development company. He said that before they became Shopify experts, he was very lucky if he got 6 to 10 leads in a month. And that since becoming a Shopify expert, he gets, on a good day, he could get 10 leads a day. And he has to turn away some of them because he just can't take on that many. So he also said that he's not a top Shopify expert. He's not like in the top 10 on their site. So it does work, right?
I mean, from personal experience, I remember at Headspace, we had a client, very warm lead, someone who liked our work, loved our design work, but chose Cooler Partners over us because they had the HubSpot certification. And that was right when they got into it, and that kind of opened my eyes up.
I know. I thought about that after I finished slashing Jeff's tires. I was so mad. We lost that job to them.
I know, because we did a lot of dog and pony to get that one.
Well, Amy, who we used to work for us, she was our account director. She left and went to this company.
I know.
And she, we thought it was a shoo-in, like, because we were still on very good terms with Amy, and we had gone in, we'd sold other stuff to that company, and
well, they were even sold on our design.
I know,
more so, and
we were going to do their e-commerce site, and then Kula beat us. They kicked our asses
because of that.
Just because of that. Yeah.
The
other benefit of being a partner with a big SaaS platform is that it can help you expand beyond the local market. And we've seen this. Jeff and Carmen have told us about this, that with HubSpot now, before when they weren't HubSpot partners, it would be very rare that they could get a company outside of the local market who wanted to work with them, and now their clients are all over the world. Guidance and mentorship is another benefit. So pretty much all of these companies offer some kind of ongoing training and consulting to the agencies. In terms of webinars, there's events, there's workshops, marketing materials, more of a sense of community. So you might think, okay, well, it's not really good to compete with all these other agencies that are like HubSpot certified or Infusionsoft experts, but in fact, oftentimes they become closer than just your typical competitor because there's so much business, that it just makes sense for them to refer other partners, which is nice, right? Then they can share tips and strategies a lot better as well. We even saw that going to an Infusionsoft partner conference last year that, there's such a big community around it. And I'd like to get to Inbound this year, the HubSpot.
Well, we are going.
Conference. Are we?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a done deal? We got to sign up like soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get it done.
One other thing is there's you reduce your risk and overhead. So I don't know if you remember back in the day when web design agencies used to build their own CMSs and sell their own off the shelf, or not off the shelf, but proprietary CMSs, and how much of their costs and time went into just maintaining this piece of software and keeping it, fixing bugs and adding new features when they weren't really a software company, and they weren't building, it wasn't a SaaS model. So the nice thing about partnering with a company like Shopify or HubSpot or Infusionsoft is that you let the SaaS giant build their software. You just get to work on building your consulting fees and your design or whatever it is you charge for on top of that. So it's a lot less of a headache on your side of things. And then the other great thing is there's additional streams of revenue. So when we talked to Aaron a couple of weeks ago from Able Sense Media, he has 2 apps that are on the Shopify store, and they're actually building recurring revenue for him. So, because Shopify has an API, they might have some limitations that they let you build an app on top of it, and then you can sell it through their marketplace and start getting, monthly revenue for that. we also talked about, Jeff, just to use Kula as an example again. He said 2 years ago that their revenue or their recurring revenue increased by like 1,000% because it started making up 35% of their total yearly revenue, which is pretty crazy for an agency. And that was 2 years ago, and they were only like silver partners then. They're platinum partners now, which is like, I can't remember how much it is. It says it on the HubSpot site, but I think they bring in around like $100,000 a month for HubSpot. So they sell a lot of HubSpot subscriptions. Now, there are some potential drawbacks. So one of them would be, do you want to be tied to one solution? You know, a lot of agencies want to be solutions agnostic. Remember we used to say that?
Oh, yes.
You know?
We were being cool.
We're solutions agnostic, man. No, but I mean, if you legitimately, let's say you're selling e-commerce to a client, but you think for their needs, maybe it's Magento or BigCommerce or something would be a better fit, you know, you may want to suggest that. If you're a Shopify expert, you're pretty much going to be drinking the Kool-Aid and pimping that one piece of software. Another thing would be just the investment of time and money. So, especially like using HubSpot as the example, there's a lot of money and time sunk into becoming a HubSpot partner in terms of training and getting certified, and just using the software itself. Like, it's a serious investment, and Jeff has talked about that before. That
even for us, just wanting to get on their marketplace. I mean, think about the time involved.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So the thing is, if your agency is kind of treading water and not really on stable footing, doesn't have a lot of cash in the bank, and you're trying to just survive, it's probably not the time to start looking at getting like HubSpot certified or something. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to save you. But if done strategically, it can work. The last thing to think about is the company stable and future-proof? You wouldn't want to go into all that time and energy getting certified and becoming this partner if the company is sort of new or unproven. Now, with the examples we had given, I don't think we have too much to worry about. Most of them have IPO'd. Shopify and HubSpot are both public, and Infusionsoft is privately owned, but it did raise like $80 million it did $80 million in revenue last year.
Well, they're actually on their way to IPO.
Yeah, they will be soon, I would think. $125 million in venture capital too. That's how much they've raised total across all the rounds.
Wow,
it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're probably, I would think, pushing the $1 billion valuation. Yeah. Anyway, those are some things to think about. Hope you found them helpful. So, with no further ado, we're going to do the interview with Kevin Brown. I'd like to welcome Kevin Brown on the podcast today. Kevin is the managing partner at Industrial Strength Marketing, a full-service industrial marketing agency based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and they specialize in working with manufacturing, distribution, and logistics companies. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hey, thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. And you told us before we started recording that you are enjoying some Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah, I think I am aiming to be the first Agencies Drinking Whiskey podcast in your series. So coming out of Tennessee and being gluten-free, I figured I would represent some good Tennessee whiskey with Jack Daniels. So I've got it sitting here on ice, and meant to send you guys some up there in Canada, but figured that was violating some sort of federal law. So
it may be.
Yeah, it's pretty regulated here. Yeah,
we can get Jack Daniels here, can't we?
Yeah, we can. But I'm surprised Sour Mash is gluten free.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's gluten free enough. Right.
Good enough.
Who's counting?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. We'll enjoy that. I wish we had some Tennessee whiskey.
Well, there's some booze coming back. I think the guys went on a booze run.
That's good.
Yeah.
Everybody's in like party mode here because tomorrow's Canada Day, so everybody's off for the Friday, and it's gonna be crazy. Probably not.
Nice. Yeah. Send out an intern and bring them back with some whiskey, right?
Yeah. Actually, I think our product manager we make him do that stuff.
Quality control.
Oh, yeah. So really excited to chat. There's a ton of cool stuff that I think is going to be a lot of, it's going to offer a lot of value for agencies out there. One thing that I love about you guys is if you go to your website, which is currently marketstrong.com, but I know you said you're rebranding because of the name. But it's so clear what you guys do. And we always love talking to agencies that focus on a very distinct vertical and don't try to just be all things to all people. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, what your specialty is and the kind of clients that you go after?
Yeah, sure. So obviously with the name Industrial Strength Marketing, it implies that we focus on the industrial space. And what's funny is a lot of people tell us, wow, you're super niche. And for us, we actually believe that industrial is huge. And over the years, we've actually further specialized within industrial. And so, yeah, I mean, as you said in the intro, it's manufacturers, distributors, service providers, and then also a growing vertical in logistics. So, manufacturers are anyone that makes things, and then even the suppliers that go into original equipment manufacturing. Distribution is a huge part of the supply chain, and logistics. We even work with a couple of truck driving companies and help them fill seats for their lanes across the country. So, yeah, really interesting vertical, and it's something we've focused on since day one.
Yeah. And I know you say it's a niche, but it's not that niche because there's tons of those companies out there. But I think it's probably very different from trying to market to a Fortune 500 software company or a startup or whoever else, whatever other companies are out there that agencies market to. I mean, manufacturing, distribution, and logistics in that sort of space, I would imagine, is very, very targeted and specific. Like they probably have, and even reading your website, you have pages for each of those three different kind of sub industries or verticals, and it's so clear from reading them that you guys really understand what companies in that space really need and want for their business.
Yeah, I mean, it's niche. Obviously, it's B2B, so out of the gate, it's going to differ from any sort of B2C marketing. And B2B is honestly probably a little bit harder. I'd like to think in many ways it's more sophisticated. You've got longer sales cycles and more touches with the not only the primary decision maker, but in B2B, there are often 5 to 10 decision makers that you've got to reach and try to influence. And so, content is king in many verticals, but in B2B and industrial, content is definitely paramount. And multi-channel marketing and marketing automation and lead nurturing over time. I mean, it gets pretty geeky pretty quick, but honestly, that's why we love it so much, is because you can't just start up an agency and work in B2B and work in this space. You've really got to, it's got to have some authentic history behind it.
Yeah. I mean, what was it that, you and your founder and CEO, I guess, did you guys have a background before in this kind of space, or what was it that sort of inspired you to say, this is what we know and do, and this is why we're going after it?
Yeah, great question. And funny enough, I mean, it's a perfect segue into a message that, we relay to other agency owners and principals all the time, is if you're going to try to specialize, I mean, it's got to be authentic and it's got to come from the heart. And so, yeah, our founder and CEO, James Soto, started this business day one, honestly, out of a personal tragedy that kind of came from, a family that came from industrial. His father worked in industrial 42 years, and sister was an industrial engineer, and James himself worked his way up on the plant floor. And so between James and other folks on the team that have either worked plant floors or have family in manufacturing, again, it came from day one of the business versus, a bunch of executives sitting around trying to figure out a specialty. And I think that's pretty, it's pretty important, because we are hearing more and more about agencies having to find a specialty. And I think, having that true, authentic start in this space is much more meaningful than just picking a specialty out of thin air.
Mm. So exactly. And I think if, naturally, if a client from one of these industries or these companies are looking for an agency, a record, or they're just they have a project they want, like a website or marketing campaign or whatever, they're naturally, you guys do a proposal or you pitch your services to them. I mean, obviously your deeper understanding of what they really need and care about is going to stand, further above from competing agencies that are just general. They service all industries and they don't really know this one that well. So, what kind of things, I guess, like when looking at your site and you've got the 3 different pages set up for each of these types of clients, manufacturing, distribution, and logistics. I mean, maybe let's go through each one. I would love to kind of know, like from a manufacturing standpoint. So you've got a lead or a client who's in the manufacturing space. I mean, what kind of things do you say to those guys, or how do you kind of show that you understand generally what they need, or at least what their target persona needs? And what are their pain points? What do they care about?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And honestly, I think it goes back to that history. So, we've been doing this for going on 11 years and even in a different form longer than that. So, we've worked with over 200 industrials over the years. And when it comes to the manufacturing space, it's rare that we meet an industrial that's not related to some sort of business from our client roster in the past. And so, just having that history and having, developed programs over the years for brands, manufacturers like them, it just automatically gives us a head start. And, they oftentimes have the same challenges and the same pain points. I mean, it's generating awareness, driving leads, and it's potentially a dysfunctional sales team and internal sales systems that aren't aligned with marketing. And then more and more, what we're discovering is these folks, at the core, don't really even know who they are and where they're going as a business. And so that's where our services expand beyond marketing, and we start to get into just upfront brand strategy and really helping them figure out what is your business model, and how do we position you and make you unique, and what are your competitors doing, what do your customers want, and what's your strategic plan. So it's really interesting that us being a differentiated agency is a clear competitive advantage, and then for a lot of our clients, we actually help them find their competitive advantage. So maybe they might be a manufacturer that can do any sort of steel fabrication, but we really help them hone in on a specific segment within manufacturing, and maybe they really focus on the food service industry, so to speak. So it is interesting that we can kind of take that specialization strategy and even apply it all the way down to our client work.
Well, to use one example of just how it seems how deeply and intimately your target audience, on the page where it talks about empowering sales channel partners, it says that your top-selling inside and outside sales guys are hitting retirement age. Turn the new blood into train killers by helping them overcome buyer objections. I mean, that's extremely, you couldn't use that line on if you're trying to appeal to every market out there. I mean, that sounds like very specific to the manufacturing space. Is it that, their salespeople are all generally kind of in their 50s or 60s?
Yeah, that's a huge force that we're actually having to deal with in this space, is that, manufacturing by and large is an old school industry, and kids aren't growing up these days wanting to get into manufacturing and these types of industries, because there's a little bit of a misperception about it being dirty jobs and greasy hands and all that. And so there's some pretty interesting statistics that say up to half of the industrial workforce will be up for retirement in the next 5 or 10 years. So it's really actually a pretty scary dynamic for a lot of our clients, and that actually leads to some work we've done around workforce development. We're actually a co-producer of one of the largest workforce development programs in U.S. history. It's called Manufacturing Day. And so it's an effort to change perceptions about manufacturing out there for kids in school. And every year we've grown it to the point where over 2,500 manufacturers and industrials will open their plant doors, and they'll have factory tours, and they'll bring in local colleges and high schools, and really, again, just try to show kids that there's some pretty amazing stuff happening in manufacturing. And so we've partnered with Science Channel, and this is all led via a few organizations, including the Department of Commerce. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. And funny enough, a lot of our clients are actually hiring us to help them, recruit and fill seats, because there's a skills labor gap in America that's it's actually going to be pretty scary if we don't figure it out. Because even though manufacturing has gone offshore by and large, it's still at least 10 to 12% of our economy, and if we don't fill these jobs, then there's a lot of work that won't get done.
I'm sure. I know that when we lived in rural Nova Scotia, the Michelin plant was probably the largest employer. And they were, of course, government really backs them and they get involved. And I'm sure a lot of your work, as you said, is probably in government relations and trying to create programs to bring more employees and more awareness to the opportunities, I would think.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's actually pretty cool that we're not just working with the private sector. Some of our engagements are actually all the way up through the names that I mentioned before, like the Department of Commerce has a really a great offshoot of the National Institute for Standards and Technology. It's called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and every state has at least one MEP, and those MEPs are there to help small and mid-sized manufacturers compete in a changing global landscape. And so we're actually working with the MEPs on helping them and their states' manufacturers. So it's a cool ecosystem because people generally know each other, even at the national level. They care about each other, and because there are so many challenges facing this industry, it comes from the heart. And to your point about the Michelin Plan, I mean, we're up in, let's say, Delaware, working with the local MEP up there, and they're talking about how manufacturing used to be such a huge part of the Delaware economy, and they've seen plant after plant just dry up, and it's really changing things, and they've seen families affected by this. So, it's cool because in some ways it really is authentic, heartfelt work, and you're not just dealing with a marketing manager of a publicly traded company who's just trying to hit his quota. I mean, you're really dealing with some clients that are facing some challenges out there, and they're doing some really amazing work, and they're innovating and in their own space. They're fascinating, intelligent people, but when it comes to marketing, they need help, and that's what's really cool about what we do is we're able to really help them, and that drives all the way back to our purpose and the reason we were founded in the first place.
Do you do a lot with, like, say, union relations as well with manufacturers?
No, we probably stop there. I think, unions are probably a whole different ball of wax, and we haven't really gotten into that space.
So just to be clear, when you say that you're going through these, do you call them NEPs or
MEPs, like manufacturing extension partnerships? Yeah.
Okay. Are you going after them as clients, to get them as clients, or is it more so just getting them to work with your clients, the private companies that need, that need to recruit, an employee base?
Yeah, that and at the national level on the program that we mentioned, Manufacturing Day. So yeah, we've got MEPs that are clients, we've got MEPs that are partners. Again, it's a pretty connected ecosystem, and so whether or not we're donating time kind of out of our hearts to help the national manufacturing ecosystem, or they're paying us to help in their individual state, we definitely work with these folks at all different levels.
And so if you have them as a client, would selling to them, to the MEPs, would it be different from selling to the private companies? Because I noticed on your website, you guys do a lot of content marketing, and you've even got a lead magnet I downloaded. I don't know if I'm an ideal client for you guys because we don't do marketing and distribution, but downloaded your industrial marketing budget guide, which is really cool. You don't always see agencies actually using lead magnets to appropriately. So, how does that work? Do you guys, do you put that lead magnet out there to generate leads, and are they mostly from the private sector, or does it also work for the public sector too?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, a lot of the content we develop for ourselves. I mean, if you look at our resources page, we're constantly developing different, high-value assets and white papers and just all sorts of different content for, folks that are on the hunt. And that's generally how we'll drive, some lead inquiries from the private sector. But, yeah, when it comes to any sort of government type of involvement, a lot of that is relationship-based. And it's actually interesting. It's one of the topics that we've really focused a lot on recently is that when it comes to marketing ourselves, what we call the 3 R's has been just our greatest channel for getting our name out there. And, a lot of agencies focus on inbound marketing and creating, like you said, lead magnets and content and trying to drive leads. And then there's this, proverbial new biz guy that's out there hounding the phones. But what we've found is that the 3 R's of relationships and reputation and referrals, I mean, that's driven, 80% of our revenue in the last 4 years.
It's a lot harder to control, though, isn't it? Like, you can do, you focus on doing good work for good clients, and I think probably most agencies out there do rely on trying to build a good reputation and trying to get referrals. But naturally, it becomes harder to rely on that. I mean, if you've got a month where your business is slow and the phone's not ringing for whatever reason, maybe it's seasonal or what have you. I mean, are there any strategies there that you can go and say, okay, we're going to like double down on this marketing channel, or, you know, or do something related to sales that's going to actually help drive some leads into the business without having to kind of wait for a referral to come in?
Yeah, I like the fact that we're jumping into a new segment here, because it actually relates back to the specialty. So look, if you're not specialized and sales are slow, and you know, you try to get a quick hit with some, you know, PPC out there, or even optimizing, you know, your SEO or whatever, and you know, you're just trying to compete with the agency down the street that's saying all the same things you are, then I don't think inbound is going to work. You know, why would they hire you? You know, again, compared to the other guy that's saying the exact same thing, that has the same 4-step process and has the same award-winning creative. I mean, we all start to sound the same at some point. So, you know, being specialized enables you to rely on those unpaid channels to drive business development. And, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, not marketing to our consumers, but letting them find us organically. And we really respect and work with an agency consultant named David Baker, and you know, he talks about how speaking and writing and, you know, PR and webinars, I mean, those channels are infinitely more critical than anything you can do to market to a prospect. And so we focus on it. We've got a plan in place. So instead of just focusing on inbound marketing and outbound sales, we actually have a 3 R's plan, and we do all those things. We focus on nurturing our clients and seeking referrals. You know, we focus on joining boards where we can hopefully either meet potential clients or meet folks who know potential clients. And then, you know, we even use awards. Like, we've been named Best Places to Work a few times. And, you know, we don't really focus on Addies and things like that, because honestly, those are a little insular to us. I mean, it's cool to win an Addie, but what do you really do? You come home and put it in your trophy case. But, you know, if you win an award like Best Places to Work or Best in Business, it gets in the local business journal. And honestly, one of our largest engagements in the last few years picked up the paper and said, oh, wow, I didn't realize there was an industrial agency. And they saw us in the paper for winning Best Places to Work. So, yeah, that 3 R's channel we actually really focus on. And again, it's driven 80% of our business in the last 3 or 4 years.
That's really cool. So, I mean, we talked about manufacturing. I'd love to kind of move to the distribution side. So, I mean, how does, again, looking at your website where you talk about very specific things that wouldn't apply to every business out there, they seem very targeted to distribution companies. So instead, you know, like most agencies that do digital are kind of talking about, in general, driving leads and using SEO and using, you know, design and whatnot. But you're talking about, like, you know, buyers could be sourcing for you by anything, buyers could be sourcing for you by anything: product names, part numbers, pricing, inventory. You need up-to-date, non-fragmented data that can be easily discovered. You know, is that kind of a common pain point with distribution companies? Is just people being able to find, you know, SKU numbers and products online?
Yeah, that is for sure. I mean, it's fascinating to see in the industrial distribution space. You'll be dealing with multi-billion-dollar companies that have a website that literally looks like it was, you know, developed in 1995. And, you know, these are relationship businesses, and, you know, these are businesses that, no joke, 10 years ago were relying on industrial catalogs. And so, you know, you're really trying to get them into the digital age, but they've got these multi-billion-dollar businesses, and oftentimes they have, you know, all these brands that they've acquired over the years. And so they're really honestly struggling to stay relevant in many ways. You know, we're currently working with a major industrial distributor who's trying to figure out, you know, what does the future look like? And they feel like they might have 5 or 10 years until they're obsolete if they don't redefine their model. I mean, you look at what some of these, outside parties have done, like Amazon Supply, and you've got folks that are shaking up this space. And so, you know, the good old days of the local industrial opening the catalog and calling the distributor down the street and going to pick up the part that they need is, it's just pretty scary to business to be in these days. So yeah, we're doing some innovative stuff for them, and these guys are 10 to 15 years behind, unfortunately.
This rings really true, because we used to have a client, actually not at our agency. I used to work with one at another agency that I didn't own. I won't say their name, but they basically they were a distributor for marine parts. You know who they are, Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Sure do.
Yeah, they could be a little bit difficult, because they were super old school, lived in kind of a rural community, and yeah, it was everything that you're saying sort of rings true just from my one experience working with these guys. So, I mean, they kind of experience the same thing where, if people want to buy things for their boats, if they need to buy a bilge pump, traditionally their dealers would, order the catalog from this company, and then they would find the parts they need and order it, and it all went through them. But I mean, how is digital really shaking this up? You kind of alluded to some of it with I think you said Amazon, but I mean, is it that even manufacturers are starting to just distribute their goods themselves through online, or is there ever any kind of like conflict between the manufacturers and distributors that way?
Yeah, really good question. Hey, before I answer that, I got to do a beer check-in. Did your product manager arrive back with your booze?
Oh, I should go see if Ricky's back.
Okay. Take a look.
I'll be right back.
All right.
Still bone dry over there.
Yeah, hey, I'm feeling really thirsty right now, actually. I'm glad you reminded me.
Sitting over here talking about like the ins and outs of B2B marketing, and you guys are bone dry, and I'm the wino in Tennessee drinking whiskey. So hey, just had to check in, make sure I wasn't drinking alone.
No, that's good.
No, it's been this interesting dynamic between manufacturers and distributors where, a lot of them in the past, didn't want to sell direct. And so they would have these interesting product catalogs online where you could browse their products, but then there's no button to buy because you had to go call a distributor to actually buy the product. So, distributors are being forced to figure out their new business model, and manufacturers are starting to prop up e-commerce sites and sell direct. And I mean, the whole ecosystem is changing, and it's it's exciting in some ways. But then you also talk to these brands that have been around 100 years, and they're worried that they're going to be out of business in 5 years. So it's scary at the same time.
So I mean, where you focus on distribution companies is kind of one of your verticals. Obviously that conversation must come up a lot. But I mean, what can you tell these guys? Can you reassure them with anything? Can you kind of give them some sort of ray of hope that as long as they kind of do this, and this, they don't, it'll reduce the likelihood of them becoming obsolete? Or is it kind of like, okay, there's a shelf life on this type of business now, just accept it and we'll drive sales in the meantime?
Man, great question. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think honestly, just a lot of distributors and traditional businesses in this space have just got to realize that the model has changed and they can't keep fighting for the status quo. And that's honestly one of our core values here at ISM is, we're constantly questioning the status quo. And again, it kind of goes back to that old school workforce. And, we've had clients in the last few years or, maybe 5 years ago, tell us, hey, why do we need a website? We've got the phone book, we've got, a Rolodex. And so, you're really fighting a lot of these traditional forces. And, I hope there's a place. Hope there's a place for these businesses because they've been kind of the fabric of America for a long time. But we've seen how Amazon has shaken up a lot of businesses. They're shaking up this space. That's for sure.
Yeah, you'll be happy to know that Kevin just arrived.
I just cracked open a Heineken.
Now I'll do mine.
Nothing too sexy though. I mean, we have so many great breweries here, and you got freaking Heineken and Stella. Don't get me wrong, it's good stuff, but
nice.
A lot of people
That'll do.
Yeah, a lot of people when they come here visiting, they always go to. They think Alexander Keith's, Keith's beer, is like what all the locals drink because it's kind of sort of famous.
Yeah, it's been here forever.
No locals drink Keith's. It's always people from outside.
Right.
I don't want to hijack what you guys are talking about, but I've got a question. I just returned from a trade show, something we kind of test. We don't really do trade shows, but I thought, hey, it's the Association of Proposal Management Professionals. So I went down to Boston, and there was so many industrial companies there because they all respond to RFPs, which really isn't our target. But a lot of pocket protectors walking around. It's very much what you described as that older client base, and it was interesting. Really wasn't our focus, but it was definitely a learning experience. But when you were talking about your client base or your personas or who you were targeting, it really reminded me of that show I just went to.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely changing, and folks they've got to get with the times. And we've had some difficult conversations. I mean, another one of our core values is tough love. And sometimes when you're dealing with a traditional space, you've got to tough love folks into kind of thinking beyond the traditional business model. So.
But our trade shows, my question is like, I'm sure a lot of your clients, when they're going B2B, they must do a ton of shows. I mean, I know they're kind of dying out now, but that was always kind of the big thing, was to go to all these different association trade shows for industrial or even restaurant industrial. I'm sure that's a big part of it. And do you help them with those shows and kind of a follow-up plan and maybe some creative?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's not a ton of our business, but yeah, if these guys are going to a trade show and spending, $20,000 on a booth and $20,000 on a rental fee and $10,000 on travel and all that, I mean, we really work with them to think beyond the trade show, and that's a big part of integrated marketing in general. Is all right, you grabbed a bunch of business cards. What do you do with it? And it's honestly not good enough to email them 2 weeks later once you've gotten back to the office and kind of regrouped a little bit. So yeah, we'll work with them to set up landing pages and promotions that happen during the trade show and data capture and then lead nurturing so that once they grab that business card, there's a program in place and just kind of thinking beyond the show and doing a little pre-planning goes a long way. So again, not a huge part of our business, but it's again just kind of getting our clients to think a little bit beyond what they've done in the past.
The next thing I wanted to ask you about was, so we kind of covered manufacturing and distribution. Now there's logistics, which I admit I don't think I've worked with a logistics company before. I know on the page it says driver recruitment made easy, and you talk a lot about like trucking and transportation and improving the reputation and hiring and all that stuff. So maybe can you walk us through that? Like who is that audience you're going after? What are their pain points and how do you solve it for them?
Yeah, so it's a pretty fascinating segment of not only industrial, but again, it's just how goods are moved around the country on a day-to-day basis. But these trucking companies, it's an extremely fragmented space, and it's extremely competitive. And just like kids are not necessarily growing up, saying they want to be in manufacturing. I mean, there's a shortage of folks who want to drive trucks, and so a couple of our largest clients are engagements focused on just putting butts in seats, for lack of better words, and helping them fill their truck driver jobs. And so it's extremely competitive. I mean, that's why you drive down any interstate in America and you see billboards and you see the sides of trucks, and you stop at a Pilot, gas station, and you see recruitment ads everywhere. And so it's fascinating that these trucking companies are, yes, they're spending some money to acquire customers, but they're honestly spending more money just to make sure that their trucks have someone to drive them.
Yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like from that page on your site that recruiting, retention, and the reputation side is kind of, it seems like it's more of a pain point for them than just getting customers, which is traditionally what we think of as what digital agencies and marketing agencies do, is they drive leads and interest online. But it sounds like you guys are doing a lot more for them than that.
Yeah, and this honestly goes back to that skilled workforce labor gap, and it's interesting. Even outside of the logistics space, we worked with a manufacturer up in Louisville, and we worked with them on a careers site, and that's a big part of our business, is helping again these manufacturers and logistics companies recruit. And we actually developed this career site for them because that was their biggest challenge, and they had so much business because they were like a tier 2 supplier for GM that they didn't need any more business. They just needed people to work more shifts because they had more work than they could handle. And so I'd never seen it before, but we had this careers.x.com site for them. And they said, honestly, we don't care about the corporate site. Just redirect our corporate URL to the career site because we want every site visitor possible to see that we're hiring. And so literally to this day, if you go to their corporate website, it redirects to a careers page because that's how critical the skilled labor gap is for them.
Yeah, that's super interesting. One thing I wanted to ask is, I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of your client base and what their needs are and how you guys go after them. But for yourselves internally, you told me that you've implemented an agency operating system, and I'm curious to know more about that.
Yeah, that's where I really geek out. So if there are any listeners right now that aren't drinking like we are, they might want to start drinking. But no, this is definitely more the operational side of the business. And again, look, there are visionaries in an agency, and then there are the operating kind of system type of dudes, and that's definitely more me. So, yeah, we kind of honestly stumbled upon this idea of an agency operating system. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Computers run an operating system. Societies and other kind of groups of people run on, whether it's religion or law. I mean, there's a system that's kind of keeping us all together. And so, if you think about an agency not having some sort of kind of global operating system, it's a little bit scary to kind of wonder, all right, well, how is the business running then? And so we actually learned about a program called EOS. It's the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it comes out of a book called Traction. There's just this really fascinating concept that's all about clarifying, simplifying, and achieving vision. And it's something we implemented a little over a year ago, and really the idea is less is more. And it's a set of components and tools that help kind of get your agency on track. So, the book is amazing. It's called Traction. Gino Wickman. I'd highly recommend it. And
it's actually on my Amazon wish list. The other day I was going through looking at books I wanted to buy, and that was on there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So we call it the agency operating system, but it's really it's entrepreneurial operating system, and it applies to any sort of business, but mostly that small to medium-sized business. But yeah, I mean, there are basically these 6 components of any business. It's your vision. It's where do you want to go? So then there's the traction, and it's like, how are you actually going to get there? There's the people side of any business, which, folks would argue that comes before anything else. There's the process side of your business. There's how do you look at your data, and then there's how do you manage your issues. And those are the 6 components of any business. And EOS is basically a system for kind of working through all those components. And it's been pretty awesome for us. It's I can't necessarily say, since it's only been about a year, I can't necessarily say that it's led to some dramatic revenue growth or whatnot, but it's definitely led to a whole lot more clarity, and it's completely changed the way that we as a leadership team operate.
So it sounds like it's kind of like a high-level strategy or maybe a framework of thinking about your business, but in terms of like practicality, how do you guys execute on that operating system? Is it documented? Is it tools that you use, or is it laid out in some way that everybody on the team is on the same page? Like, how do you guys actually fulfill on that agency operating system?
Yeah, so it starts with the vision, and it's getting the vision out of the CEO or the leadership team's head and getting it down on paper. So step 1, document and clarify the vision. So that's everything from your purpose to your core values, some of the touchy-feely stuff that precedes any sort of strategic planning. But then it's really, getting into what is the 10-year target? What is the 3-year picture? What does it look like in 3 years? What does it look like in 1 year? Like, where are we trying to go? What's the marketing strategy? Like, what makes us unique as a business? What's our guarantee to our clients? So it really kind of clarifies that vision all on one sheet of paper. And then, the flip side of that is what, again, I've referenced earlier. It's called traction. So great, we've got this vision. Now, how are we going to get there? And that comes down to quarterly rocks and your issues list. And so that's where it becomes a lot more tangible. And so this EOS kind of approach has really changed the way we meet as a leadership team. They've got this concept called level 10 meetings, and there's a pretty rigorous structure to the meetings, and even, this idea of you rate your meetings once you're finished, and your goal should always be to hit a 10. And, we've got this scorecard that we use every week. So we've got these really critical business metrics, and we track them in a scorecard that holds us accountable. We set these quarterly rocks as a leadership team and as a company, and so it really flows down from there. It's been, pretty fascinating to see that it not only kind of works at the high-level vision level, but it's also on a real tactical day-to-day basis. So yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, I mean, when you started, I didn't know where you were going with it, but keep going. I think we kind of implement a similar system. We don't call it that, and I haven't read the book yet. I'm sure we'll start incorporating that once I do. But that's been, super interesting to me lately too, is just the idea of like creating kind of a process and a framework for how you think about your business, so that you're not just going, like what we used to do at our, when we used to run an agency, was we were kind of, for the most part, flew by the seat of our pants, and we didn't really have that kind of structure and framework in place to think about goals, and it was just kind of survival all the time. Or, we were you could foresee things a little bit here and there, but, for the most part, we were just day-to-day living, right? So that sounds like, and I think what we do more now at Proposify is we do kind of have a little bit more of that big picture vision, and then here's more of the smaller strategic, practical things that we do to execute on it. So that's really, really super interesting, and it's cool to hear that that's working for your agency.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say that there aren't challenges, because I think something you touched on is you've got this vision, and different people will think of vision and think of kind of day-to-day processes in different ways. And so we're big believers in DISC profiling here. I don't know if you guys have used that in the past, but if you're a high DISC, like DISC, so it's kind of like a Myers-Briggs. It's a personality profile. And so if you're a high D on the DISC scale and you don't want to get caught up in the details and you're more of a vision person, then really sticking to an operating system is going to be a challenge. But honestly, I think an operating system like this is mostly developed so that you do kind of corral some of the vision into a really actionable format. So it's been not without challenges, but I think it's been really effective, and even down to making day-to-day decisions. So there's this idea of an accountability chart, which is kind of like a supercharged org chart that lists roles and responsibilities, and those roles and responsibilities are tied to what's called a people analyzer. And it sounds pretty robotic, but it's actually been probably the most effective way I've ever seen to kind of analyze, look, do people on your team make sense, and are they in the right roles? And so you kind of you evaluate everyone based on your core values, and then you evaluate them based on whether or not they're in the right seat. And that includes, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity for it? So it's this really cool way of looking at your team. And then even over and beyond that, they've kind of got some advice on how to establish a process within a company and establish your way of doing things, so that whether or not you're trying to build up a company to sell and kind of raise the valuation of the company, or you're just trying to grow quickly and onboard people and have them know your method of doing things, there's a way to document your processes. And so it's amazing how it really kind of stretches all the way from vision down to process documentation in one kind of one operating system.
Very cool. So if there's an agency owner listening to this who kind of wants to learn more about that stuff, you recommend read the book Traction that you mentioned, or is there another place online they can that you're pulling some of this from that they can check it out as well?
Yeah, Traction is definitely the best place to start. It's written by a gentleman named Gino Wickman, and then there's a website, eosworldwide.com, and that's kind of the overarching group that runs EOS. And then what's cool is there are EOS implementers across the country, and so we actually hired an implementer to help us. We did mostly self-implementation because I'm big enough of a geek, in case you can't tell by now, that we were able to implement most of it on our own by just reading the book and kind of geeking out. But we actually did hire an implementer to come spend a day with us and make sure we were on track. And so through that EOS Worldwide site, you can find a local implementer and kind of have that person as an extension of your team.
I'm sure there might be some agencies out there listening that could probably partner with you, maybe pull you guys in for maybe a client that they may pull in that is an industrial client. I'm sure you have partnerships you've lined up.
Yeah, we do that all the time. I mean, it's funny, an agency will get a really kind of niche B2B client or industrial, and they'll just kind of throw their hands up and say, "What the hell do we do here?" And we'll get those calls from time to time, and we love partnering with agencies. We kind of say that we're Switzerland. We play in the sandbox well, and as long as we're doing good work and having fun and making a little bit of money, then we're happy.
Very cool. So if people want to check out your agency site, it's marketstrong.com, and your blog is industrialmarketer.com. People should check that out. You guys have got really good content there. Thank you so much for being on the show, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thanks for everyone listening. And I hope by now everyone's had a little bit of whiskey or beer, and hope it's been valuable.
Yeah, how much of that whiskey did you get down?
Oh man, it's pretty poor showing so far, but I actually realized I didn't just buy a fifth. I think this was actually a little bit bigger than that. So we'll see where the day takes us, and I'll send you a picture later to show you what kind of dent I made on this thing.
Looking forward to that. We'll post that in the show notes as well. Cool. Awesome chatting, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Kevin, Kyle, thanks, guys.
Take care.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. If you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you rate and or review us on the iTunes Store. If you have a story or lesson to share with other agency owners and managers from around the world, hit us up. Just email Kyle or Kevin at proposify.biz. And also, if you write business proposals and you want to make that process a whole lot easier and more streamlined, check out proposify.biz and sign up for a free 30-day trial. Cheers!